Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to have the opportunity to give this keynote on the European Dependability Computing Conference in Munich. I like to talk about smart safety, safe detection of new hazards. Smart safety is a concept we are driving within TÜV Süd to enable safe and resilient operation of connected machines and collaborative robots, AGVs, and drones. I like to start with three main statements which I'm going to address in my presentation. A universal classification of hazards is missing, a well-established hazard language common for all of us. Second, we have to accept that any strategy which targets hazard identification based on IoT data will always be incomplete. We need a disruptive approach how we automate hazard detection and risk assessment. Hazard and risk semantic, as well as the safety properties, have to be default elements of every digital representation to enable safe and robust production system. So the question is not, can we run an automated risk assessment during the runtime? The question during the digital transformation is, can we guarantee safety with any other method outside of risk assessment and runtime? My agenda follows the following line. I'd like to first introduce the fourth pillar for smart safety. Then I'd like to discuss the risk assessment. What does it mean for autonomous and connected machines? Give a brief description of a risk reduction agent, how the concept has to look like, and discuss the iterative nature if we apply risk reduction at runtime. I'd like to end with the requirements to the digital representation that we can automate risk assessment. The concept of safety today is based on three pillars. It's the requirement to an organization. I call it the safety culture. Certification of people is one example. Capability of people. Requirements to the development process is well known. The process capability to develop, to produce. And the requirement to the product by itself. Product capability, certification, and factory audits over lifetime. But if we look on the right side to a machine and we bring all the regulation standards together, at the end we have a safety documentation. It's complete, but it is in most cases documented by paper. Now we come into the world of smart manufacturing. The requirement stays the same. The safety chain has to be complete and has incorporate all changes. But in smart manufacturing we are using data. At runtime, we optimize processes, we do some predictive operations. We have to accept that the static assessment on paper is not enough to ensure this system with this complexity, and that we have to add dynamic elements. We at TÜV Süd have introduced this, what we call fourth pillar for safety, required event-triggered actions during the technical lifecycle. And this allows us to enable concepts like plug and produce, and dynamic or condition-based safety releases safety measures under the consideration of environmental condition and the state of the factory, the recipe, the machine, and the people at this moment in time. Now we have to jump a little bit deeper into the risk assessment. Smart manufacturing can utilize the concept of the digital twin to manage the safety lifecycle. Please follow the data flow and ask the question which decisions are driven based on these data. Do we have considered all possible changes at runtime during our risk assessment 2 years ago? No. Now we take an example. On the right side, I marked the machine. The manufacturing cloud has optimized the data and likes to optimize some parameters for better productivity. The supplier cloud had analyzed some damages, maintenance issues, risk, and like to change some parameters to reduce a certain risk related to a hazard if I operate this machine. Two information are coming to the digital twin. Which decision overrides other? Which decision can we accept? At this moment in time, we need a runtime risk assessment. I have to explain briefly the core of the risk assessment and risk reduction process. So we have these 6 elements: determine the limits of the machine, identify the hazard, estimate the risk based on the risk factors, evaluate the risk, whether risk reduction is required in the context of the application, eliminate the hazards that only during the construction of the machine. So for us, reduce the risk associated with these hazards, inform the user of the residual risk. If we come back to the risk factors, we see immediately the severity of the harm is a static parameter. A certain hazard has a certain severity. The probability of occurrence, the frequency of exposure, the occurrence of the hazardous event, and the possibility of avoidance are parameters that we can analyze by using IoT data. Now we investigate the technical life cycle of a product. We make the correct hazard and risk assessment, we develop the machine, we integrate the machine, we confirm it typically with an attestation of conformity at the end of the machinery directive at the point timestamp T0 that we fulfill all rules of the machinery directives. We are CE compliant. And then we start the use of work equipment, we modify small changes, big changes, but now we have a connected machines, dots, apps. And for every single modification, we can assume we are not violating the original safety concept, but how these modifications interact and what kind of changes are allowed, it's hard to prove based on the paperwork done 2 years ago. We have to be able to prove within a digital twin the assumption within our risk assessment T0, are they correct or not? I used the green HV and the slightly bigger robots. Are our assumption made in T0 correct for every hazard that we can expect? Yes, we go on. Now we have to modify. The risk assessment at runtime is now becoming a requirement. It's not nothing nice or innovative. It's becoming a requirement. We concluded that the safety risk assessment for smart manufacturing has to be a continuum. The technical safety lifecycle management has to be based on hazard and safety profiles. What does it mean? We need a generic and complete hazard description for this factory line. I call it a hazard language, a semantic. We need a method to read and validate the assumption in the risk assessment process automatically, e.g. the possibilities of the avoidance based on runtime data, the frequency, and so on. We need a standardized mapping of safety measures, our control function, to certain hazards so that we can automate this process. Hazard and safety profiles has to be standardized for this factory line, for all machines or components talking the same language based on the Industry 4.0 administration shell or digital twin. On top, we need a standardized method for hazard classification, superposition of safety measures, to automate risk reduction and to make all the same assumption. At this moment, I like to give only a principal architectural answer that the risk reduction agent is doable even if we know that our observation is incomplete. I like to introduce the concept of hazard and risk modeling based on a digital twin and the corresponding safety profile as the baseline for any risk assessment at runtime. Safety models and the profiles have to be standardized, as we know from the Type C standards for machines, where the safety functions and the assumed risk assessments is always standardized. So the agent is observing the machine and the environment continuously with IoT data, with sensor data, and is updating the prediction model at real time. Now we can accept partly observable because we don't get all data. We compare the prediction model with our theoretical complete model, and if they are running in line, we accept the result of the prediction model. For any conflict between the monitoring and the prediction model, we have the classical safety function and we jump back as a fallback in the functional safety operation and the safe state. The strong benefit is obvious. In case we can guarantee that no person is detected in the specific dangerous zone, the possibility of avoidance of the risk is 100%. Risk reduction is not required. We don't stop the machine, productivity goes on. Smart safety is using this basic principle of the hazard and safety profiles now twice. We are using it for the risk assessment, hazard identification, observation, model-based risk assessment, and risk mitigation. And then we can use a similar principle to, for example, degrade a safety measure and increase productivity. Because we know that we don't need the safety measure, because we know that the risk is not there, the hazard is there but not the risk, and therefore the risk mitigation is not required. In the future, of course, we have to remap safety measures and has to work on autonomous validation of safety function, but this is the second step. The first step is to achieve automation of hazard and risk assessment at T0 to guarantee a robust operation productivity, and on the other side, a complete documentation of the situation, digital safety compliance. At the end of this chapter, I like to use an example to explain the difference between static safety and dynamic smart safety. The green HUV is moving between two production cells. There's a blue box in front, and a mechanical hazard is detected, so safe stop, slow movement would be the result. Smart safety has more information because the environment is observed, and the smart safety agent knows that the blue box has some leakage. Some substances are coming out, could be a powder, could be something different. On the other side, the smart safety agent understands that the red box on the HUV could become a source for ignition of this situation. So the mechanical hazard is classified exactly at the same level 1, but the smart safety agents identified that stopping of an HUV in this situation, the HUV by itself would be the source of ignition. I have to remove the HUV, and the safety measure is classified as L2, remove the HUV out of the critical zone. The safety measure of the static safety is in this case the hazard, the source of the ignition. Risk reduction at runtime requires a couple of more parameters, so we will focus in the next chapter on this. Smart safety means hazard, risk mitigation, and safety measure modeling. And as always, we are discussing in this validation phase data pre-processing, model application, overview about actual hazards at runtime, develop all the structures that are required. So I like to highlight again, part 1 is the theoretical part that we define during the factory building process, during the certification of all the machines that have these models. It is complete and consistent and accepted in the community. The AI-based part, the observation of the properties, is a kind of autonomy for standard situation. We expect certain situation and then we can react. For unexpected situation, we fall back in our classical functional safety and we stop anything. You see that the dependency between the prediction model and the complete model is a little bit more complicated than I have shown in the slides, because we have, of course, continuously updating and learning. And as we have seen that safety measures, even out of the fallback model, could be critical. The post-processing is also an intelligent process. I like to focus on the iterative nature of risk assessment and risk mitigation. And I like to use these slides to bring the puzzles again together that I have described in last slides. The hazard of the HUV, it's mechanical, it's moving machine. We have a certain risk assessment, severity of injury, frequency, possibility of avoidance. We have a risk reduction requirement that comes with the 3 or performance level E. And then we have a safety goal, avoid collision with this performance level. We cannot, with design changes, avoid the hazard because the HUV is moving. But we can discuss only the control measures from different assets that we bring together to achieve our safety goal. In this context, I like to mention that we have also to consider that a lot of new functions will have this what is called SOTIF, safety of intended functionality. So there is no additional safety control measure that the target function by itself have to ensure the safety or control the safety functionality. And then we have learned in the last slide that the safety measure by itself could be the source or the root cause for another hazard. So we need a small risk assessment in the situation, and that's the iterative nature of risk assessment at runtime. Now we are coming to the end of my keynote, and I thought about how can I bring all this information in one picture together, and I tried in this way. We have assets in our factory line, and the digital twin, the Industry 4.0 administration shell, the green part consists all the relevant information about hazards, about risk mitigation, about safety functions, control measures, so that the hazard and safety control measure identification of all the things moving in our factory line is based on the digital twin. On the other side, the risk reduction agent has the capability to model what the hazard can create, what kind of risk mitigation is required in situation, if it is required or not, what kind of probability of avoidance is possible, and map the right safety measure that is available to this hazard. It's very important that we bring now together the hazards, the safety measures, and we bring together safety measures of the neighbor. So I can use neighbor sensors, I can use neighbor safety measures of machines, I can use safety measures of the building. And all this can be managed only by a risk reduction agent, because the machine itself never knows what kind of probability is available in the factory line using the capability of the neighbors. At the end, I like to summarize all the requirements to a digital representation and conclude my talk. We have learned at TÜV Süd that the risk assessment at runtime is doable based on our research activities over the last 4 to 5 years. The technology is there. You could apply the concepts for application-specific use cases already today. Hazard detection and risk mitigation at runtime requires risk and hazards has to become readable for machines. We need a semantic language, unique and universal hazard language, so that we have the same understanding in all these different situations. Standardized methods for hazard classification and superposition safety measures have to become accepted Type C standards. And this is the key, that we cannot develop this complexity application specific for every customer. We have to develop this concept once for manufacturing, and then we can apply it to robots, to HUVs, to special machines, and so on. We have to accept that risk and hazard detection based on sensor data will be always incomplete. Therefore, standardized hazard models has to be part of our digital representation. The digital twin gives us the completeness that the observation of IoT data can never achieve. We have learned within TÜV Süd that the data quality we collect today is still not good enough to develop complete and consistent models. So there's a lot of work in front of us. I wish all of you a successful conference. Thank you very much for your attention.